It's the Studebaker. Yeah, you know, the one with the little doggy in the window that goes...
For decades, Carol Burnett has been the soul of American comedy, a woman whose voice could lift spirits and whose face became a symbol of joy across generations. Through the groundbreaking brilliance of The Carol Burnett Show and her unforgettable portrayal of Eunice, she carved a place in the hearts of millions. One laugh, one tear, one sketch at a time. She was elegance wrapped in laughter, resilience stitched into every line of a script. Carol Burnett, an icon not just of comedy, but of raw, unfiltered humanity, defined an era where humor became healing, and pain was hidden behind a curtain call. We remember her twirling into our lives, red curtains parting, voice bright, eyes alive with joy that felt endless. But what if behind that unforgettable smile was a silence far louder than applause? What if the world's funniest woman was quietly surviving a grief no stage could ever hold? At 92, the truth of Carol Burnett's life cuts deeper than any performance she's ever given. At 92, the truth of Carol Burnett's life cuts deeper than any performance. And hauntingly, some wounds still refuse to fade. The years have been kind to her face, but cruel to her heart. And what she carries now may shock even her most devoted fans. If Carol Burnett ever brought light into your home, if you still remember the way her voice made you feel, please like this video and join us as we honor a woman who gave the world laughter while hiding a pain it never saw. It is nothing short of devastating to realize that the woman who would one day become America's beacon of laughter began her life wrapped in shadows so deep, so silent, that even the warmth of a smile felt foreign. Carol Burnett, born in 1933 in San Antonio, Texas, entered a world that gave her no safety net, only instability, loneliness, and a home drained of love. Her father, once a projectionist lost in the magic of cinema, became consumed by alcohol, his dreams dissolving in bottles he never put down. Her mother, equally entrapped in addiction, drifted through Carol's childhood like a ghost, emotionally numb, unpredictably cruel, rarely sober, and even more rarely present. By the time Carol could understand the world around her, her memories were already carved with neglect. The two people who should have held her through nightmares and kissed her goodnight had long since traded love for liquor and left her to grow in silence. Both parents would eventually die from alcohol-related illnesses, but the truth is far crueler. They had already abandoned her in every way that matters long before death claimed them. When they gave up custody, Carol was taken in by her maternal grandmother, Mabel White, a woman of little means but fierce devotion. In 1940, the two moved to Hollywood, chasing light in a place that offered only deeper shadows. They lived in a crumbling boarding house, crammed into a single room filled with peeling walls and the low murmur of lost souls, addicts, the unstable, the discarded. Their rent, $20 a week, was nearly everything they owned, leaving nothing for comfort and barely enough for dignity. Yet in that broken place, her grandmother gave Carol something neither parent ever had: unconditional love. But even love, as pure as it was, could not mend what had already been torn inside. Desperate for some version of joy, Carol created an imaginary twin sister, Karen, a radiant, confident girl who wore bravery like perfume. She became so convincing that even neighbors believed she was real. Carol would climb the fire escape, change her clothes and demeanor, and descend again as Karen, animated, adored, loud in a way Carol could never be. Then, moments later, she'd return as herself, quiet, invisible, starved for affection. This wasn't childish play. It was an emotional survival tactic, a child's desperate theater for love. Years later, she confessed, "Karen helped me cope when I didn't have the words or the courage," a chilling reflection on how deep her isolation truly ran. But not every escape was invented. On Saturdays, she and her grandmother spent their only quarter, a staggering portion of their income, on movie tickets. In the theater's glow, Carol found not just entertainment, but escape, beauty, harmony, affection, and meaning danced across the screen in a language she understood more than her own home. And when the films ended and hunger returned, they would quietly steal toilet paper from the theater restroom, too proud to beg, too poor to buy. Carol understood the shape of desperation before she ever touched the idea of hope. One day, she heard Tarzan's iconic yell reverberate through the screen, Johnny Weissmuller's cry splitting the air, and she became obsessed. She mimicked it relentlessly, not knowing she was strengthening her lungs, finding her voice, discovering control. Later she would say, "That yell became my outlet. It was the first time I felt powerful. In that cry, a wounded child found her breath, and unknowingly laid the first stone of a legacy that would one day make the world laugh." She wasn't just escaping pain, she was transforming it, turning a fractured beginning into the foundation of a career built on connection, courage, and unforgettable sound. Carol Burnett never set out to make the world laugh. As a teenager, her dreams were quiet, shaped more by survival than ambition. She wanted to be a journalist, a tribute, perhaps, to the life her mother never fully lived, a writer whose talent was lost in bottles and silence. Carol carried that broken legacy gently, hoping to make something whole out of it. UCLA was the goal, but when it came time to enroll, a single number stood in her way: $50. For others, it might have been forgettable. For Carol, it was the full weight of poverty, a wall she couldn't scale. She didn't cry. She simply folded the dream and tucked it away like too many others. Then, a stranger, unnamed, unexplained, offered her exactly that amount. No conditions, no reasons, just faith. "He believed in me before I did," she would later say. That moment didn't just change her plans, it redefined possibility. She stepped onto UCLA's campus not as a girl from food stamps and borrowed shoes, but as someone who had been chosen. She planned to study journalism, still clinging to the safe path, but she never expected what came next: a mandatory drama class. She entered out of obligation and found, unexpectedly, that she belonged. For the first time, someone saw her not as poor, invisible, or out of place, but alive, expressive, radiant. "I wasn't shy anymore," she recalled. "I was funny, loud. I was me." A professor pulled her aside and said simply, "Don't ignore that." So she didn't. She changed majors, terrified but determined. It was her first real risk, and it paid off. By the end of her first year, she was named Most Promising Newcomer in UCLA's theater program. It was more than recognition. It was permission. The girl who once roared like Tarzan in a crumbling apartment now had a stage to call her own. And just when belief was taking root, fate returned. At a party in 1954, while quietly wrapping leftover hors d'oeuvres for her grandmother, a wealthy stranger approached her, not an agent or producer, but a shipbuilding millionaire. She told him her dream: to reach New York, to find Broadway. She admitted she couldn't afford the journey, so he made an offer: $1,000 for her, $1,000 for her boyfriend, with 3 rules: never reveal his name, use it only for career, and help others if they succeeded. She agreed. No job, no safety net, just a ticket to try. They arrived in Manhattan, money vanishing fast, hope thinning faster. One night, after nearly giving up, she heard on the radio that a hurricane named Carol was hitting the East Coast. She took it as a message: don't quit. Soon after, she found the rehearsal club, a home for hungry young artists with nothing but drive. 4 girls to a room, 1 bathroom, shared dreams. Carol worked nights as a hat-check girl, days chasing auditions. It wasn't easy, but it was everything. For once, she wasn't surviving. She was becoming. The girl who had once been too poor for tuition now walked among possibility. Proof that sometimes, when the world seems quietest, it's only pausing to make room for your voice. Carol Burnett's first true breakthrough didn't happen under Broadway lights or behind lavish curtains. It began in a narrow, overheated rehearsal room tucked inside the rehearsal club, surrounded by hungry young actresses, all hoping for their moment. Among them, Carol was just another face in the crowd, until a satirical number, bizarre and unexpectedly brilliant, found its way into the review. The song, a mockingly passionate ballad about John Foster Dulles, the famously wooden Secretary of State. Most saw it as a throwaway gag, too absurd to matter, but Carol saw possibility. She threw herself into the performance with fearless sincerity, parodying love so intensely it became theater. The audience didn't just laugh, they roared. What was meant to be a light filler turned into the evening's showstopper. And among the laughter sat a few key figures who saw something far bigger. That single ridiculous song opened the door to the Jack Paar show. Nervous but determined, Carol reprised the performance on national television. And again, she captivated. Her gift wasn't just comedy. It was truth wrapped in nonsense, vulnerability hidden beneath exaggeration. Audiences recognized it. So did producers. The next call came from The Ed Sullivan Show, America's biggest stage. On January 6, 1957, trembling with fear, Carol stepped before millions. But the moment the music began, she was unshakable. She followed the Dulles parody with a take on puppy love, weaving innocence and irony into a performance that had the nation in stitches. I was terrified, she'd admit later, but the second I opened my mouth, I felt like I belonged. By that August, she was back on Sullivan's stage, her rise accelerating, but never random. She took every opportunity, no matter how small, and turned it into proof of her range. In 1955, she played a ventriloquist's doll's girlfriend on The Paul Winchell Show, a strange, whimsical bit that stayed in viewers' minds. Then, in 1959, came the moment that cemented her place in theater history. Carol was cast as Princess Winifred in Once Upon a Mattress, a muddy, brash, wonderfully unrefined girl who defied every fairy tale mold. The off-Broadway production exploded, eventually moving to Broadway, with Carol front and center. Audiences fell hard. Critics took notice. She wasn't just another comic actress. She was something original, something the stage hadn't seen before. Her Tony nomination that year confirmed what audiences already knew. Carol Burnett had arrived. But amidst the applause, she remembered the quiet beginning. The man who, years earlier, had offered her a chance. On June 22, 1959, exactly 5 years to the day after he gifted her and Don $2,000, Carol sent the money back. No fanfare, no demands, just a simple repayment. The man never responded. He stayed invisible, just as he wished. But she honored his faith, not just with a check, but with a life that blossomed from it. He gave me a shot I never would have had, she later said. I owed him that, and more. that repayment wasn't merely financial. It was symbolic. A full-circle moment for the girl who once wrapped food in napkins to take home. Now, she stood beneath Broadway lights, her voice, comic, raw, unmistakably hers, reverberating across an audience that finally saw her. And for the first time, perhaps, she truly saw herself too. Carol Burnett's leap into television didn't begin with fanfare. It began with grit, misjudgment, and a wildly absurd love song about Secretary of State John Foster Dulles. Performed during a low-stakes review in New York, her over-the-top delivery turned a throwaway joke into a seismic moment. Laughter erupted, producers took notice, and soon Carol found herself invited to The Jack Paar Show, then The Ed Sullivan Show. But what truly changed her path was a guest spot on The Gary Moore Show in 1959. Over the next 3 years, Carol didn't just appear, she evolved. Every taping became her workshop, every sketch a lesson. While others rested between scenes, she studied timing, pacing, audience chemistry. Her cleaning lady character became a staple, but what stayed with her most was the power of authenticity. Moore's spontaneous Q&As planted the seed for one of her future hallmarks: direct conversation with her audience. "Those moments taught me something vital," she'd say later. "You can't manufacture connection." Still, the road ahead demanded more. When CBS hesitated to approve a special with Julie Andrews, citing that neither woman was famous enough, Carol felt dismissed. Then fate staged a wink. 2 executives overheard her joking about needing a ride, and a truck literally stopped beside her. They took it as a sign. That moment birthed Julie and Carol at Carnegie Hall, a broadcast that swept major awards and proved she could command a primetime spotlight. And in 1967, when she invoked a forgotten clause in her CBS contract, granting her the right to create a variety show, executives pushed back. They offered her a sitcom instead, but Carol stood firm. "I wanted sketches, songs, silliness, depth. I wanted everything." On September 11th, The Carol Burnett Show aired for the first time. It didn't just work. It became a revolution. At its peak, 30 million Americans watched weekly. "That number scared me," Carol admitted, "because every laugh mattered." Her show was a dazzling blend of sketch, satire, and soul. At the top of each episode, she'd turn to the crowd and say, "I'm so glad we had this time together," a phrase that comforted a nation. But behind the laughter was constant self-doubt. "I'd lie awake wondering if next week's show would fail," she once shared. In a male-dominated world, she became one of the first women to produce, write, and star in her own variety series, paving the way for future legends like Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. The accolades followed. Time listed her show among TV's top 100. TV Guide ranked it number 17 of all time. The Carol Burnett Show won 25 Emmys, and her collaborators like Harvey Korman and Tim Conway earned their own. Still, Carol's real triumph wasn't gold statues, it was sincerity. People didn't just laugh, they felt seen. She turned comedy into quiet revolution. Financially, she became one of the highest-paid women on television, earning around $50,000 per week in the 1970s, over $300,000 by today's standards. But for her, wealth was a tool, not a goal. In honor of the anonymous man who once gave her a chance, she began quietly supporting other dreamers, funding scholarships, mentoring young performers, and backing arts programs. "I was given hope," she once said. "Now I try to pass it on." Carol Burnett wasn't simply funny, she was transformative. Her legacy wasn't just laughter, it was proof that courage, kindness, and authenticity could change everything. Even from the back of a boarding house to the front of a national stage. The spotlight can be blinding, even for those whose brilliance once lit up every stage they stepped on. At the very peak of the Carol Burnett Show's acclaim, when Emmy Awards piled up and more than 30 million Americans tuned in religiously each week, behind the velvet curtain, a storm of silence and emotional strain began to gather. The laughter was genuine, but so were the fractures. Harvey Korman, Carol's towering comedic partner and longtime pillar of the show's magic, began to drift into something darker. During the show's 7th season, the warmth he once brought to rehearsals gave way to unpredictable moods, frigid distance, and moments of open hostility toward guest stars and crew alike. What had once been a joyful partnership cracked under pressure. The final blow came backstage. Harvey, confronted by Carol for his behavior, shut the dressing room door in her face and said with chilling bluntness, "I'm just not happy here." It wasn't just the words, it was the loss of connection, the erosion of trust in a space that had once been family. Heartbroken, Carol called his agent and fired him, a decision that felt less like vengeance and more like mourning. But sometimes, a door must close before another can reopen. By Monday morning, Harvey returned with a bounce in his step and a whistle on his lips. True to her half-teasing promise, Carol burst into laughter and rehired him instantly. To seal the forgiveness with a smile, she hung a new plaque on his dressing room door. Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky. It was more than a joke, it was a second chance, a quiet pact to keep building joy amid the chaos. That chaos had a new name soon after: Tim Conway. A comedic genius whose unpredictability bordered on anarchy, Tim flat out refused to give everything in rehearsal. "Some of it comes to me in the moment," he once shrugged. That spontaneity made every live taping an adrenaline-fueled gamble. No one knew what was coming, not even Carol. From his iconic elephant story to countless improvised twists, Tim's genius sent castmates into real-time breakdowns of laughter. Even the unflappable Dick Van Dyke cracked under the pressure. But that brilliance came at a cost. The crew was constantly on edge, trying to shoot scenes that threatened to go gloriously off the rails at any second. Carol, despite adoring the electricity Tim brought, bore the weight of maintaining structure. Harvey once said, only half joking, he never did anything the same way twice. Yet amid the spontaneous explosions of comedy, Carol was the steady heartbeat of the production. She held egos together with grace, soothed tensions behind the scenes, and showed up with smiles even when her spirit was weary. She was the one who slipped tissues to crying crew members, who made time to listen when the cameras weren't rolling, who laughed loudest at others' jokes so they wouldn't feel invisible. "If I couldn't make them feel safe," she later confessed, "we'd fall apart." And so, in a world that mistook comedy for ease and brightness, Carol Burnett stood as quiet proof that laughter is forged through fire, that every moment of levity might have been stitched together with exhaustion, fear, or disappointment. And still, every week, without fail, she showed up, not because it was easy, but because she knew the healing power of a laugh given freely, especially by someone who understood just how much it. Some moments in show business blur the border between character and truth so sharply that they leave permanent and deeply personal scars. For Carol Burnett, that moment arrived in 1977 with a sketch known as The Gong Show, part of her recurring series, The Family, usually filled with sitcom-style Southern eccentricities. But this time, the writers stripped back all the comic facade to reveal something unbearably raw. Carol portrayed Eunice Higgins, a woman weathered by lifelong disappointment, stepping onto a horribly mismatched talent stage with a fragile hope that someone might finally choose her. In each note she sang, raw longing and genuine heartbreak pulsed. Instead of empathy, the judges dissected and ridiculed her in public. Most piercingly, real-life host Alan Ludden delivered a cutting dismissal that shattered her resolve. Carol didn't lean into her signature comedic timing. She played Eunice with tragic gravity, her vulnerability naked, her breathing visible. As the camera backed away from her tear-streaked face, the studio was utterly silent. No chuckles, no applause. Even the crew behind the lens wept. According to crew accounts, many were visibly shaken, their composure broken in front of cameras, a rarity on any light-hearted set. Critics hailed it as a tour de force, commending Carol's dramatic vulnerability and the courage to air that kind of gut-wrenching truth within a comedy show. Awards quickly followed, but Carol Burnett herself has never watched it back, not even once over nearly 50 years. In a 2010 interview, she said plainly, "Eunice's pain felt like my own." And indeed, Eunice became a mirror for Carol's childhood wounds: abandonment, poverty, alcoholism, and the gnawing ache of feeling invisible. Eunice's desperate yearning to matter was Carol's ache too. This wasn't the calculated humor she mastered in sketch after sketch. It was something rawer, deeper, and infinitely more unsettling. It terrified her. For audiences, it became unforgettable, pivotal in the making of a cult classic, leading to the 1982 TV movie Eunice and the spin-off Mama's Family. But that original sketch remained untouchable, too powerful to replay. Carol later reflected, "I'm glad we did it. But it wasn't what our show was about. We were supposed to help people forget their troubles, not remind them." Yet she also recognized the truth of its impact, proof that comedy doesn't always demand laughter. Sometimes it ends in tears, and sometimes those tears speak louder than any punchline. At its heart, the sketch revealed a deeper courage, the courage not to perform for others, but to confront the past within herself. For Carol Burnett, that silent reckoning was her most daring performance of all. Fame often comes wrapped in glitz and applause, but for Carol Burnett, the spotlight also cast shadows that stretched far beyond the stage curtain. At the height of her fame, when the Carol Burnett Show was drawing tens of millions of viewers and showered with Emmys, her personal life was quietly unraveling. The woman who made the world laugh was privately surviving heartbreak after heartbreak. Long before the world adored her for her fearlessness and charm, Carol had already endured the collapse of 2 marriages. Her journey was never just one of comedic brilliance, but of resilience behind closed doors. Her first marriage, to college sweetheart Don Soroyan, was born of shared dreams, but crumbled under the weight of grief neither of them were equipped to carry. They married in 1955, brimming with hope and theatrical ambition. But after the tragic death of Don's daughter from a previous relationship, his light dimmed. Depression consumed him, and alcohol followed. Carol tried to hold the pieces together, but as her star rose, his sense of purpose fell away. On Christmas Day of 1959, they separated, a holiday once filled with color now remembered in silence. The divorce was finalized in 1962, and Don would never truly recover. He died in 1990, a man haunted by what never was. Carol once admitted, "I tried to love him enough for both of us, but I couldn't save him. He didn't want to be saved." Their relationship, though short-lived, was a reminder that not all dreams bloom under shared ambition. Sometimes the brighter one shines, the more painful the contrast becomes. Carol carried that pain silently, never using it as a crutch, but allowing it to shape her depth, her empathy, and her extraordinary sensitivity to human frailty. Then came Joe Hamilton, a man with television genius and a complex heart. They married not long after Carol's career began to soar, and for a while, it felt like stability. Together, they had 3 daughters, Carrie, Jody, and Erin, though they also mourned a miscarriage in 1965. Joe had 8 children from a previous marriage, and their blended household pulsed with energy, chaos, and emotional landmines. Professionally, Joe was a force behind Carol's success. Personally, he was a storm she couldn't always predict. Their home, a mix of scripts and lullabies, became both sanctuary and battleground. Carol often came home from tapings with laughter still on her face, only to find a different kind of performance awaiting her, that of a wife navigating the widening distance between love and understanding. She once said, "We had all the tools, but we kept building separate houses." It wasn't just about careers diverging, it was about emotional withdrawal, about conversations that slowly dried up into logistical exchanges, about the ache of being unseen in your own kitchen. As the years wore on, Carol became the anchor of a family drifting under the surface. Joe's deep-seated need for control, compounded by his own battles with addiction and pride, created fractures that could not be mended by compromise alone. Carol, ever the peacemaker, poured herself into the role of mother and mediator, often hiding her pain behind a practiced smile that millions mistook for serenity. There were nights when the applause of a live studio audience still rang in her ears as she tucked her daughters into bed, knowing full well that tomorrow would bring another silent breakfast table, another missed opportunity to reconnect. Eventually, the marriage dissolved, and Joe's presence in her life faded from partner to memory. His shadow lingered, but she refused to let it define her. She once said, "You can't be funny if you're bitter. I had to choose healing." And she did. Through love, through service, through showing up again and again for those who needed her most. It wasn't an escape from pain. It was a deliberate act of courage. For Carol Burnett, surviving 2 broken marriages wasn't about regret. It was about rediscovering who she was without them, and realizing that the most profound kind of strength is the kind that endures quietly, without needing to be seen. In the late 1970s, tragedy crept into Carol Burnett's life, in a way no standing ovation or comedic triumph could shield her from. The laughter she brought to millions was powerless against the horror that unfolded inside her own home. Her eldest daughter, Carrie, only 13, began a harrowing descent into addiction, dabbling in cocaine, marijuana, hallucinogens, and prescription pills. What started as quiet rebellion became an uncontrollable storm. Carol, a mother who had fought so hard to give her daughters a different life than the one she'd known, stood helpless as her vibrant, creative child withered before her eyes. Each day brought fresh terror. The girl who once sang to herself in the mirror was now missing school, disappearing for hours, speaking in a voice Carol no longer recognized. Rehab became routine, facility after facility, therapist after therapist. Still, nothing held. The breaking point came when Carrie vanished, slipping away from a Texas treatment center in the dead of night, leaving no note, no trace. For Carol, it was a living nightmare. Every hour stretched like a lifetime, every phone call a potential heartbreak. When Carrie was finally located, Carol had to make the most excruciating decision of her life: to have her daughter committed to another facility against her will. Carrie, feeling betrayed, refused to speak to her mother for over a year. The silence between them was deafening. "It ripped me apart," Carol confessed in a trembling voice during a rare interview. "But I kept telling myself, if I don't do this, I may lose her forever." That kind of love, the fierce, sacrificial kind, is often invisible, misunderstood. Carol once said, "You have to love them enough to let them hate you." She bore that hatred like armor, clinging to the hope that someday Carrie would understand. And eventually, she did. By the age of 17, after relentless effort and unimaginable struggle, Carrie emerged sober. It was the beginning of a miracle neither of them dared name. Carrie stepped back into the light, acting, singing, writing, each step forward a victory over the past. The wounds didn't disappear, but they became something new, a bond forged in fire. Together, mother and daughter co-wrote Hollywood Arms, a play rooted in Carol's hard-scrabbled childhood. They performed it side by side. For Carol, it was more than art. It was redemption. She watched with awe as Carrie claimed her own identity, no longer just the daughter of a legend, but a woman of sharp wit and undeniable talent. But then, the cruelest twist of all. In 2002, Carrie was diagnosed with lung cancer. The disease spread quickly to her brain. Within months, it claimed her life. She was only 38. The grief that descended on Carol was beyond words. "Losing her was like losing a piece of my soul," she said, her voice cracking with a pain that time has never softened. And yet, through the devastation, Carol found the strength to finish what they started. She brought Hollywood Arms to the stage, not out of ease, but out of obligation, to Carrie, to their story, to the unbreakable love that had defined them. Opening night was a blur of lights and silence. Carrie wasn't there in body, but Carol felt her in every line, every beat. "That night, I felt her there with me," she whispered, "and I had to be strong for both of us." By then, Carol's second marriage had long unraveled. The emotional toll of Carrie's addiction and Joe Hamilton's struggles, alongside the crushing weight of celebrity, had fractured their union. The divorce came in 1984, a quiet end to a once promising partnership. Yet Carol, ever gracious, never closed the door on Joe. She kept the lines of love open, even after their paths had formally parted. When Joe died in 1991, she mourned him too, not just as a former husband, but as a chapter of her life that had shaped her resilience. Through it all, Carol Burnett remained the steady heart of a family fractured by pain and pieced together by love. Her courage wasn't just in the laughter she shared with the world, but in the private heartbreaks she endured with unwavering grace. Years later, when Carol met musician Brian Miller, 23 years her junior, it was not some storybook romance born of red carpets and fame. It was a quiet solace, a shelter built not from passion, but from patience and understanding. They married in 2001, just 2 months before Carol would suffer the unthinkable loss of her daughter, Carrie. In those final moments, as Carol stood at the edge of another abyss, Brian became her anchor, offering the kind of strength that doesn't seek attention, but simply endures. He didn't try to erase the pain. He simply stood beside her while she bore it. Through the storms that followed, Brian became the steady presence Carol could lean on when the world felt too heavy. It was not a love that healed all wounds, but one that helped her carry them. Yet life, with its brutal persistence, was not finished testing her heart. In the years that followed, Carol faced a second, slower heartbreak. Her youngest daughter, Erin, began exhibiting signs of addiction, a battle painfully familiar, yet no less harrowing. Over the course of nearly 20 years, Erin cycled through 8 rehab programs, clocking more than 240 days in and out of treatment centers. There were brief moments of hope, flickers of clarity, but each time, relapse crept back in like a shadow. Carol watched helplessly as Erin became a mother herself and struggled to care for her young son, Dylan. The patterns repeated: chaos, instability, emotional absence. Then, in July 2020, came a breaking point no grandmother should ever face. Erin reportedly sent deeply alarming messages to her children, so concerning that authorities intervened and placed her under emergency mental health care. Faced with an unbearable choice, Carol and Brian acted. They filed for legal guardianship of Dylan, fearing for his well-being, and within weeks, the court granted them temporary custody. Carol, then in her late 80s, stepped back into the role of full-time parent. Not from desire, but from unwavering necessity. In a brief court statement, she offered only this: "When you see your grandchild hurting and your own child can't help, you just act." There were no headlines, no fanfare, just love in its rawest form. What Carol did then, what she has always done, was quietly heroic. No headlines screamed her sacrifice. She didn't call attention to her struggles or seek sympathy from the public. Behind closed doors, she did what she had always done: protect those she loved, even when it broke her heart. The world knows Carol Burnett as the woman who lit up millions of living rooms with joy and laughter. But the woman behind the stage lights has endured more sorrow than most could fathom. She is not just a legend of comedy. She is a monument to resilience. A mother who stood firm in courtrooms, waited silently in treatment centers, wept in hospital corridors, and still showed up with grace. Who never allowed grief to define her, but let love lead her through it. Her life is not merely a story of stardom. It is a testimony to quiet strength. Because for Carol Burnett, courage was never about wearing a smile for the camera. It was about holding the line when everything else fell apart. It was about showing the world that love, even when bruised and battered, never stops fighting. Even in her 90s, Carol Burnett continues to embody what it means to age not just gracefully, but powerfully and purposefully. At a stage in life when most fade from view, she has defied every expectation, returning to the screen with performances that reawakened admiration in critics and rekindled deep affection among fans. At 89, she stepped into the role of Marion in Better Call Saul, playing a seemingly sweet grandmother who quietly transformed into a pivotal figure in the series' complex narrative. Her portrayal was disarming and haunting, filled with restraint, quiet defiance, and lived wisdom. It reminded the world that her brilliance had only deepened with time, not dulled. This was not merely acting, it was an echo of a lifetime lived in front of and beyond the spotlight. Then, at 91, she stunned again in Royale, portraying Norma Delacourt, a wealthy woman presumed comatose who awakens with sharp wit, delivered through jumbled, improvised speech. It was an unorthodox performance, playful and poetic in its layered expression, a dance between nonsense and emotion that only a master of craft could execute. That role led to a historic Emmy nomination, making her the oldest woman ever recognized in her category. But for Carol, it was never about awards. It was about honoring the art form that had defined and sustained her entire life. Each appearance has been a testament to her enduring love for performance and her unwavering belief that storytelling, no matter the form, can heal, connect, and transform. Today, Carol lives quietly in Southern California with her husband, Brian Miller, a devoted partner 23 years her junior, who has been her steadfast anchor through life's most crushing losses, including the death of her daughter Carrie and the painful guardianship battles over her grandson Dylan. At 91, Carol remains mentally sharp and emotionally grounded, embracing her age without apology. She walks daily around her Santa Barbara estate, often joined by Brian or close friends. Her diet is clean, light, and carefully monitored. She's reduced red meat, limits sugar, and focuses on hydration and whole foods. A personal trainer visits twice a week to guide her through gentle resistance and balance exercises. She also meditates and takes long, deliberate pauses throughout her day. A habit born not from slowing down, but from appreciating the quiet after a life spent chasing applause. While the mirror may reflect age, her gaze remains steady. Her smile still carries the sparkle that lit up television screens across America. There's a grace to her now, a peace that has cost her deeply. Financially, she is stable, with an estimated net worth of $45 million, accumulated from decades of reruns, royalties, best-selling memoirs, and smart real estate investments. Her primary home in Santa Barbara is a sun-drenched sanctuary filled with books, photos, and mementos of those she's loved and lost. She also maintains a more private retreat in Santa Fe, a place she describes as her escape from the noise of the world. As for her legacy, while no formal details about a will have been disclosed, Carol has taken deliberate steps to protect her family's future, including the guardianship of her grandson and the quiet support of young performers trying to break into the arts. She remains fiercely private about these decisions, but those close to her say she's meticulously organized, wanting to leave nothing undone. Though she rarely seeks the spotlight, Carol continues to make select public appearances, most recently at the 2024 Emmy Awards and an anniversary tribute to The Carol Burnett Show. Her presence still commands awe. Producers, actors, and industry veterans speak of her not in the past tense, but as someone whose legacy remains actively shaping the culture. Her influence is woven into the DNA of modern comedy. She paved the way for women who dare to be bold, brash, funny, and vulnerable all at once. Names like Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, and Maya Rudolph have publicly acknowledged their debt to her path-clearing bravery. And yet, when asked about her impact, Carol often shrugs it off with a soft smile. "I'm just lucky I got to make people laugh." But behind that humility is a woman who carried her family through addiction, heartbreak, loss, and the crushing loneliness of outliving so many she loved. The wounds of losing Carrie, the emotional fatigue of decades in the public eye, and the stress of fighting to protect her grandson have left a tenderness in her that's unmistakable. The grief doesn't vanish. It lingers in the corners of her voice, in the long pauses between her words. And yet, she shows up. Always has. Always will. Carol Burnett doesn't just represent resilience. She is resilience. Her life is not simply a tale of stardom. It is a chronicle of quiet endurance, of making joy a rebellion against sorrow. At 91, she isn't chasing relevance. She is relevant, precisely because she never stopped being real. In a world often consumed by speed and superficiality, Carol Burnett's presence is a gentle defiance, a reminder that authenticity, kindness, and perseverance carry their own kind of lasting brilliance. She didn't just survive the storm, she taught us how to dance in it. And in doing so, she left behind more than laughter. She gave us permission to feel, to hurt, to rise, and above all, to keep going, no matter how heavy the curtain may fall. If Carol's story has touched your heart, even just a little, please consider liking this video. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of her journey moved you most? What do you remember about the first time you saw her on screen? Your words help keep her legacy alive, not just as a star, but as a soul who gave us all permission to laugh, cry, and carry on.